Hello everybody, I hope you're all having a beautiful day. I'm gonna say something a little controversial, but hear me out. If you want to learn how to paint, then you should start with oils. In this video, I will be making the case for why oil paint is better for learning than acrylic. We'll discuss the differences between these paints and you'll see some side-by-side comparisons, and I'll address some common objections. This is a big topic because in the Evolve program, we can get our students to pro-level painting skills in about 350 hours, which is a really short amount of time. But I'm not confident that we would be able to do that in the same amount of time if we taught in acrylic instead of oil. The fastest way to learn how to paint, and many other skills for that matter, is to perfect one simple skill at a time, starting with the most important foundational skills first, so that each skill builds directly on top of one another, so that each new skill is supported by all of the skills that came before it. Because you're carefully investing your time into perfecting one skill at a time, it might seem slower than other methods at first, but if the goal is pro-level art skills, you will quickly surpass all the other methods by a long shot. So let's keep this in mind as we break down the differences between these paints. The most obvious difference is the drying time. Acrylic dries fast, and this is a big disadvantage for learning. When you're painting with acrylic, you have to be constantly aware of how wet or dry the paint is. It gets even worse that the composition of the paint is firming up and changing while you are still painting, making it incredibly difficult to manage with a brush. And this adds an additional dimension of complexity even when you're learning the most basic of skills. And this gets in the way of perfecting one simple skill at a time. And it also compels you to work fast. When you are learning, speed is your enemy. Having a clock ticking in the background adds another level of pressure, forcing you to rush your painting to get everything in before the paint dries. Rushing prevents you from perfecting those basic but vital skills and will develop bad habits, and you'll never really move forward with your art. Now, to avoid rushing with acrylic, you could say to paint in layers, and that's a really good point, but that doesn't make the drying time go away, and it adds more steps to a process that we want to keep simple for learning. The less skills that you have to develop to reach mastery, the quicker you'll get there. In comparison, oil paint gives you the time to complete whatever you intend to do with a brush. Think about that. You can easily wipe parts out of the painting, put them back in, push, pull the paint around to get the effect that you want. Oil paint is way more forgiving than acrylic and especially watercolor. When you're learning, you want to work with a paint that doesn't severely punish you for your mistakes. You want to have the chance to do your absolute best and put the brush down on your own terms, on your own time, and be able to say, I have painted this to the absolute best of my ability, rather than work with a paint that dries faster than you can even paint it. Now, you can adjust the drying times for both paints. With oil, you can quicken or slow down the drying time and even make a painting dry overnight as long as you aren't using heavy impastos. You can also lengthen the drying times of acrylics, but at that point you may as well be using oils with its superior quality and other advantages, such as how easy it is to mix oil paint together. Let me put it this way. Look online and you'll find people searching for how to blend acrylics like oils, but you'll never find someone searching for how to blend oils like acrylics. One of the first things that you need to learn in painting is how to make a gradient. Look at how this sphere isn't complete without one. In order to turn form, to give a lifelike impression of 3 dimensions and volume, you need to learn how to make a gradient. This is absolutely essential because our world is made up of all kinds of transitions, gradients from one thing to another. Your ability to make a gradient is one of the most simple, objective ways to verify whether or not you have a command over your brush. So it's incredibly important to learn this from the very beginning to accelerate your growth as a painter. Oil paint mixes and blends in with itself easily to make the most butter smooth, luscious gradients far beyond what any other paint can offer you. We want your learning journey to be as smooth and frictionless as possible. Don't make what is arguably the most challenging beginner skill even harder by trying to do it with acrylic. And if that's convincing enough for you, then skip ahead to the next chapter in this video. But I wanted to let the paint speak for itself. So I ran a highly controlled gradient test. Now, I've written out the full methodology and results for this test in the description of this video, so you can check that out if you're really interested. But the long story short is that I set up the test in such a way that would show any subtle blemishes in my brushwork as I tried to make the smoothest gradient possible. And despite using a highly respectable acrylic paint, after 3 attempts I couldn't come close to the level of lush softness that I was able to easily achieve with the oil paint. This was mainly due to the fact that the acrylic paint was drying so fast. When I added a small amount of water to my brush in the second and third gradients to keep the paint more malleable, the paint became too thin to blend smoothly without streaking. And you can see how in the third gradient, when I put that gradient on top of that other previously dry section, you can see that dry layer underneath peeking through. The paint is thinning as that gradient is being made, whereas with oil, that would have covered directly on top of that, and as it was being built up, it would get softer and softer. Now keep in mind that if I had allowed myself more tools or mediums to create these gradients, I would have been able to make a very soft gradient with acrylic. But with more tools at my disposal, imagine how much further I could have taken that gradient in oil. So in this experiment, the paint speaks louder than any tools, techniques, and even my own skill. As far as mixing paint on the palette goes, you shouldn't have a problem with acrylic or oil as long as you are mixing with a palette knife. But you can see how mixing with a brush in acrylic shows its weaknesses, both on the canvas and on the palette. One of the themes that keeps repeating itself with acrylic versus oil paint is control. Oil paint simply gives you more control, flexibility, and freedom with your paint. This might seem intimidating at first, but as you can see from these gradients, oil paint by default is an easier, more forgiving paint to work with. Whereas with acrylic, you're at the mercy of the paint controlling you, such as the fast drying time, forcing your hand, or preventing you from finishing your gradients to the best of your ability. Except for the lightning fast drying time, oil paint can essentially do everything that acrylic can do, and then a whole lot more. So those are the main technical points for why oil paint is better than acrylic for learning painting, and there are more benefits, but now let's address common objections and disadvantages in oil. And the first one is that oil paint is expensive. This is perhaps the biggest objection to oil paint, and it's a huge plus in favor of acrylic because it's a significant barrier to entry, right? You can easily go out and buy a good quality set of acrylic paint, try it out, and see if you like painting without making any significant commitments with your time or money. Oil paint, with its superior quality, luscious luminous colors, and overall higher functionality, asks for a bit more commitment on the part of the artist. If you just want to dabble around and have fun, then of course paint with whatever floats your boat, right? But if you want to be a serious hobbyist or an aspiring pro and you really want to get good at painting, then you should look at your education like an investment decision, right? So to learn how to paint, the investment of money is higher for oil than acrylic. But the investment of time is significantly lower for oil than acrylic. So you get a much higher rate of return in a much shorter amount of time if you can pay just a little more. And you can figure that once you reach pro-level skills, you sell one of those paintings, You basically broke even on the difference between those materials. Not too bad. Next objection is toxic fumes. I've heard a lot of people say that once you switch from acrylic to oil, you never go back. But I've actually encountered a few people who have tried oils and then gone back to acrylic because of the smell or toxicity of the paint. So there's a few myths that need to be dispelled here. First, the vast majority of oil paint is not toxic. There are a few toxic pigments like lead white, cadmium, and cobalt, but you can easily avoid these with synthetic substitutes. But what about the smell? Well, the toxic fume smell associated with oils doesn't come from the paint itself. It comes from these unhealthy, popular solvents like turpentine and white spirits. Artists use these to thin down the paint and clean their brushes, but you can easily thin down your paint and clean your brushes with other alternatives, which is what I do and what I recommend. Oil paint itself has a very faint smell, especially compared to acrylic. But that being said, I have encountered some cheap, poor quality oil paint with lots of fillers, and personally I thought that they smelled nasty, like just gross. And it just makes me wonder how many people have tried oils and then were completely repulsed by it simply because they purchased poor quality paint, which I would not recommend to anyone. So be mindful of what pigments you purchase. Use linseed oil to thin down your paint. Use a bar of Dove soap to clean your brushes. And don't buy poor quality paint. And you shouldn't have any problems at all with bad smells or toxic fumes. The last common objection is that oil paint is intimidating. Hopefully by now I've shown you how learning with oil is easier than acrylic, and that its value outweighs its cost, and that oil is not toxic or unhealthy. So if there's anything left to address, it would be your own fears that you wouldn't know what to do with the oil paint once you got it, that you would have this big contamination mess on your hands. And that's a really big one. So far we've only talked about the materials aspect of learning how to paint. But of course there's more involved. Regardless of what paint you use, for an effective education you need guidance, instructions that allow you to focus on one thing at a time and show you how to accomplish each new skill. You could have the best paint in the world, but without someone there to show you how to paint, the value is essentially meaningless. So you're going to want to look for a guide, not just someone who gives you the information and then lets you fend for yourself. No, you want a guide who will commit to your results and help you every step of the way. When you have someone who is patient with you because they've made the same mistakes as you, and they're there to hold your hand and guide you and keep you on track, there's nothing left to fear. Now, acrylic is great if you want to find out whether you like painting or not. But if you already know that you like painting and you want to get better at it, oil paint will help you learn more easily and more quickly, giving you the smoothest, most frictionless path to gaining a command over painting in general. And from that place of skill, you'll be able to confidently branch out into other paints that interest you, like acrylic, watercolor, or even digital. Like I said, there's a lot more that goes into making professional quality paintings, and I made a free mini course talking about these 3 things that you absolutely must have in order to reach pro level skills. Oil paint is not one of them. You can definitely develop pro level skills from just about any medium, but hopefully I was able to provide a solid argument for why oil paint is the best of them to learn with. But these 3 things run deeper, and if just one of them is missing, I don't see how it's possible to reach pro-level art skills in a reasonable amount of time. So it's a great road mapping session for you if you want to figure out your next steps in your development as an artist. I'll put in the link in the description below. It's about 15 minutes long, but packed with powerful ideas. Let me know if you have any thoughts to add or objections to raise, and I'd be happy to converse with you in the comments below. I also have a bunch of videos coming up about learning painting that I'm really excited to share with you all, and so you can be notified when the next video comes up by hitting the subscribe button. See what I did there? And also you can hit the like button if you want to easily return to this video and share it with your friends. So thank you everyone, and I wish you all happy painting.